Hi, my name is Tina and this is Knitting Blooms. You can find show notes for everything I talk about on my blog at www.knittingblooms.com. And if I miss a link, please feel free to contact me on Ravelry as Bloomingknitter, or you can email me at knittingblooms@gmail.com. Come and join the Ravelry group so you can be eligible for all the prize drawings. And be sure to introduce yourself so that I can get to know you also. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter as Bloomingknitter. And don't forget to click the like button on Facebook for Knitting Blooms. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do the decreases for the toe as well as the Kitchener stitch. If you have missed my previous videos on how to do a top-down sock, where I start with the cast-on for the cuff, working down the leg, the heel flap, the heel turn, and the gusset, then you can check my blog for those tutorials. But today I'm going to focus on the decreases for the toe and then the Kitchener stitch. Now, I have figured out where my toe should come in based off of the measurement of my foot. I typically use about 1.5 to 2 inches for my toe, and that is just from years of making socks. I know that that's approximately how long my toes usually are. So when I am measuring my sock here, I measure from the tip of the heel to where I am with my sock, and when I get to approximately 1.5 to 2 inches from where my toe comes till the end of my foot, then that's when I know I need to start my toe. Now, if you like your sock a little more snug, then you should stick with the 2-inch range, meaning when your sock is 2 inches shorter than your overall foot length, then that's when you start your toe. If you like your sock a little bit looser, then when your sock reaches approximately 1.5 inches short of your overall foot length, then that's when you start your toe. So now I will show you how to do the decreases. Now I am using the magic loop method for these socks, so I will be decreasing 1 stitch on this side of the needle and 1 stitch on this side of the needle, and then when I get to the back side, I'll decrease 1 stitch on this side and 1 stitch on that side. So we're going to start with every row starts with a knit stitch and ends with a knit stitch. So you're going to start with a knit stitch, and then this first decrease is going to be an SSK. So you're just going to perform an SSK here to decrease 1 stitch. And then you're going to knit across this row till you have 3 stitches remaining on this row. And when you get to the end and you have 3 stitches remaining, then you're going to do a decrease on that side, and it is going to be in the form of a knit 2 together. Again, magic loop is my preferred method for knitting socks. So if you prefer to knit your socks on double points, you might have to adjust where you make your decreases slightly. So here I'm at the end of the row with 3 stitches left, and I'm going to do a knit 2 together. And then I have 1 stitch remaining, and I'm going to do a knit 1. And then I will turn and go to the other side and do exactly the same thing on the other side, where I'm going to knit the first stitch, do an SSK here, and then knit across these stitches to the opposite side of the needle. You're going to always start with a decrease row and then do 1 plain knit round after the decrease row. So working to the other side to 3 stitches remaining on the needle, and you're going to decrease with a knit 2 together, followed by a knit stitch. And again, now I would do a plain knit round, and then I would continue with this 2-row repeat, a decrease round and a knit round, until I get down to the number of stitches that I want for my toe. And in this particular case, I'm going to continue decreasing until I have 10 stitches remaining on this needle and 10 stitches remaining on this needle. And as soon as I get to that point, I will come back and I will demonstrate the Kitchener stitch for you. Now that I have finished the decreases for the toe, we are ready to do the Kitchener stitch. And this is to close up the end of the toe, and it just to make it look nice, like you wouldn't even notice that that you had a bind off on the toe with using this stitch. The Kitchener stitch can be used for a lot of different things. Anytime you have to bind off stitches, live stitches, and you want it to look really nice or look like it's the knit stitch, like it was just continued over the edge. Now, because this is the edge of a toe, we know that we already have the same number of stitches on each side. But if you happen to be doing this Kitchener stitch on, say, the back of a sweater or joining a cowl or something like that, you just want to make sure that you do have the same number of stitches on both needles. You want to also make sure that your working yarn is on the back of the work, on the back needle. Now, there has been times when I have come across when I've been using Kitchener stitch, and it just so happens that my yarn is coming from the front needle. And what I do to fix that is I just first go from the front needle to the back needle as if to purl, just to get it on that back needle, just to move it back there. But in this particular case, it's already on the back needle, so I don't have to worry about that. So here we are a little bit closer so you can see this. To start the Kitchener stitch, once you get the Kitchener stitch going, it is pretty easy to keep moving. But to start, I always forget which way to start. There's 2 steps that you have to do before you can actually start removing stitches, and then it's just a continuous process. But before you can start removing your stitches, you have to get these first couple of stitches going. The first one you want to do is, again, your yarn is on the back needle, and you want to go into the first stitch on the front needle as if to purl, and pull your yarn through. Now, I have quite a length of waste yarn here, quite a bit of it. I don't need this much waste yarn, but it never hurts to have extra. So again, the first part is to go in as if to purl on the first stitch and do nothing with that stitch. And then the second part is to go into the first stitch on the back needle as if to knit and pull it through. One thing you want to make sure as you're doing this, that your yarn is not over your needle, such as this. If I were to pull it through, I'd have this loop over my needle here. You want to make sure that it's on the bottom side of your needle, underneath. So that is the first getting started. Now it's just back and forth and back and forth. So you're going to start first. After you've done the first 2, you have You've purled the first stitch and then you've knit the first stitch on the back. Then the front stitch is always going to be knit off. So after you've knit that back stitch there, or pulled the yarn through as if to knit, you're going to pull the yarn through the front stitch as if to knit, and then you're going to take that stitch off. Now, I have found, for the most part, that it's sometimes easier to leave the stitches a little bit loose while I'm working them, but it just depends on how you want to look at it. You can leave it a little loose, or you can pull it tight, whichever is your preference. So after you have knit that front stitch off, then you're going to come into the next stitch as if to purl. This is again on the front needle. So you're doing 2 things on the front needle, and then you're doing 2 things on the back needle. Okay, so we've come into the front stitch as if to purl, and then we're going to purl off the back stitch. Again, you're knitting off the front stitch and you're purling off the back stitch. So you're sticking the yarn in as if to purl, and then that stitch comes off the needle. That's the first part of the back part, a back stitch. And then you're going to knit or run through as if to knit the back stitch and pull it through. And again, I'm going to leave these stitches a little bit loose so that at the end I can show you how to tighten that up. I find that it's easier to go back and tighten everything up to make it look nice than it is to try and pull it tight, and sometimes it doesn't look quite right. Again, we're going to stick the needle in the front stitch as if to knit it, or running through as if to knit. Again, I'm going to leave that a little bit loose, and then we're going to slide that stitch off, and then we're going to purl. And then we're going to purl the back and drop it off, and then knit the back. So the stitches go as such. Again, I'm leaving those stitches a little loose so you can see how it works. You're going to knit the front, and then drop the stitch off, and then purl the front and leave it on. Purl the back, and make sure that your yarn is behind your needle, and take it off, and then knit the back. So the sequence is front, knit off, purl, back, purl off, knit. Sometimes I forget and I have to go back and look at the details, but that's okay. As long as you make sure that you do it properly, it'll all come out. So purl, and then purl the back off. And then knit the back. Knit the front. Oops, I think that stitch just popped right off of there. We don't want to do that. There we go. Let's pull it a little tighter. And I think I got that on there wrong. I want to make sure that that stitch is around to the front. It happens sometimes. But you just want to make sure that you have that little bar there if you accidentally drop off your stitch too early. Knit off, and then purl. Purl off the back. And it's not really purling, but we're just going through as if to purl. And then we're going to slip that off and then knit. So knit off the front and then purl. Purl off the back. And knit. And if you ever find that your stitch does not have something on it, it means that you forgot a step, and I would just take it back until you figure out where you all screwed up. Knit, and then purl, and then purl, and then knit. The first couple times I did this, I did struggle quite a bit with it. I highly recommend the first couple times that you do this, that you set aside some time where you can really focus, where you can watch this video and then do it, and then turn the video back on again if you need to have a little bit of a refresher. You can always tell where you are in the sequence. Say, for instance, I were to put this down. If I were to put this down in the middle of going across, I would always finish out a full sequence. So I would always finish by knitting that back stitch. And then I know that the next part that I need to do is knit off the front. I always want to make sure that I have the same number of stitches on the front and the back. So then when I pick it back up again, I know exactly where to start again. So I'm going to knit, and take that off, and then purl, making sure the yarn stays behind that needle. And then purl the next one off, and then knit. And then knit. Off, and then purl. This is where it gets a little different because you're at the last stitch, always making sure that that yarn stays behind. And then you're going to purl the stitch off, making sure not to drop that front one off, and then knit the back stitch, and then the last two, which would be knit the front stitch off. There is no purl because there's no other stitch, and then you purl the back stitch off. Now it looks right now a little wonky because, like I said, I left those stitches a little loose so that I could tighten them up when I was done. So now I'm going to show you how to go back and tighten those stitches up. You will kind of start to see where the V's are, because that's what we're trying to create here, are the V's. And you want to start at the end where you started your Kitchener, because you have your loose yarn on this side, which is where you want to be able to pull it tighter. So you're going to start with that first stitch and tighten it up, okay? And then you're going to go to the next stitch, and then you're just going to pull that until you see that nice little V there, okay? And then you're going to go to the next part of the stitch and pull it, and then pull the next one, and just until you see your nice little V here at the end, right here, okay? and then you're going to pull the next one, and then pull the next one. And it's very easy to be able to pull. You can pull it tight or loose, but you want to be able to make it look like those knit stitches are going right down. And I find that doing it this way, where I leave the yarn looser, it makes it easier for me to get the right tension on my stitches. If I tried to pull them tight when I do this stitch originally, a lot of times I will pull them too tight because I can't really see exactly how those stitches are lining up. But this way I can pull it and then really get a look at how much tension is on my yarn. And you see how you can't even tell which stitch that is that we are tightening up here. And you're just going right down the line, holding the yarn off to the side if that helps. You know, and again, just pulling to the yarn until enough tension so that you have that nice V. So you keep going until you get right to the end, making sure to tighten your stitches up just as much as you want, or as little as you want. The end gets a little different because you're pulling your stitches and you don't want to accidentally pull your end out. I had plenty of yarn here. And then at the end, you have a very neat edge to your sock. From here, you would just go about weaving in your ends. And how I usually do that is I put my hand into my sock, and then I like to give the end just a little bit of a tug, and then I just stick my end back down through close to where I finished off my Kitchener stitch, and then pull it through and then weave in my ends from there. So then you have a nice end to your sock. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you will check out my other tutorials on my blog at knittingblooms.com. And if you have any questions about this tutorial or any other tutorial that I have on the blog, please feel free to contact me at knittingblooms@gmail.com or on Ravelry as Bloomingknitter. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.